is that delightful aroma I smell coming from my TV? Beautiful food porn cinematography. Stress, anxiety, more food porn. Screaming pressure. Did I mention the food porn? Passion and love twisted together to become obsession. And just a dollop more food porn for good measure. If it smells, tastes, and sounds like the bear, it must be the bear. The bear is back. And while season 3 might be a little unfocused at times, and it may be the weakest season yet, it is still enthralling, captivating, borderline perfect filmmaking. So, if the bear wants to spend an entire season just meandering about and essentially just telling flashback after flashback, montage after montage, not addressing any of the previously set up plot threads or addressing any of the new season 3 plot threads, and just leaving them all dangling all over the place and not really wrapping up the season and then ending on a cliffhanger to make the season kind of just feel like half a season. And to that I say, well, if The Bear is still going to be the best edited, filmed, acted, created, produced, and just the best show, like even The Bear at its worst is still better than everything else. And so I say, let 'em cook. Every second counts. The motto, the mantra, the 3 words to live by in Olivia Colman's Fancy Pants MasterChef restaurant. And the 3 words that The Bear as a show lives by. Every second of The Bear counts. Every second of The Bear matters. Every second of The Bear is so meticulously well crafted and thought out and precise. It is just such a delightful show to look at and just experience. I am overwhelmed by this show, particularly this season in the first 3 episodes. The Carmen flashback, the bottle episode around the table, non-negotiables, and then the 3rd episode that goes over a couple of months of the restaurant fully opening. That is essentially another montage. I don't even understand how they could possibly figure out from a storyboard perspective how this is all going to flow and not just be chaos and messy and gross, but it feels like organized chaos. It feels so brilliantly structured. Every single moment of it feels so completely thought out and detailed. It doesn't feel like they just filmed a bunch of shots in the kitchen and just kind of put them together and goes, I hope this feels kind of chaotic. It is so cleverly chaotic, organized chaos. It's overwhelming to experience. Every single second is just so intently thought out on like the pre-production stage, but then to actually create it and make it feel the way they want it to feel and to make me feel so much. I couldn't care less about fancy pants, pretentious restaurant fancy shit. Like every time I see one of those plates, I'm like, wow, that looks like a really nice entree. If I was to get 4 entrees, then 3 mains. That is not any food at all. That bloody chef, bloody Jeff from Community is always like, subtract. And I'm like, no, addition, add, multiply. That is not food. That is nothing. And yet, to make me feel so much about these characters that are doing a thing I couldn't care less about is just such a testament to the power of how they tell their story. The way this show has such like a command of its fast, frenetic pace cutting. There are so many geniusly fast-paced, close-up, fast cuts, but then the way it is able to make a moment have emphasis and power when it suddenly holds on a moment. For a show that is so frenetic and fast-paced, any single time it holds on a shot, a face, an expression, an item, a piece of food, something for more than like a second, suddenly it has so much more weight, so much more power, and it really hits home. Episode 2 of this season, the bottle episode, the non-negotiables, has so many fantastic examples of this. There are so many quick, fast-paced moments, and then it suddenly cuts to Sydney's face as she realizes they're gonna do a new menu every day. And it probably only holds on it for like 4 seconds, but that's like 50 times slower than any other shot so far in the episode. And you're just suddenly like, oh my God. And it just sinks in this moment, this realization, and you're there with Sydney. The same as when the whole episode's gone off, there's like 50 people in the room, and suddenly Marcus walks in, and it's so quiet and slow. And just that moment of like, oh, we're all petty squabbling. Marcus is properly actually dealing with something. And you feel it just because of the way this show has been edited, the way it's been filmed. Nothing feels like a mistake. Every second counts. It is just delightful. They just know exactly when to do what they need to do. And it does so many different things. Like, this show really feels like it's dialogue focused, stress inducing, anxiety inducing. And yet the first episode of this season, which I think is easily the best one, is almost tranquil in how it fast cuts, almost tranquil in how it does its montage storytelling. It is able to do so many different things because it just knows how to make a shot make you feel a certain way. And it's just, honestly, sometimes there would just be like a moment where something's happening, Carmy, Richie, and then something would cut to like a close-up of someone like tapping a fork in their hand on the table, and just that close-up, I would just be like, I would be like laughing to myself. I'm just like, that was so perfectly placed in this moment to emphasize and reinforce everything that's going on. I'm giddy with excitement from how good the filmmaking is. So I truly believe that this show, at least for what it sets out to do, it's pretty much perfect. Is this season the most self-indulgent? Is this season the most pretentious? Of course it is. It absolutely is. It really kind of takes a step back and goes, oh, the plot? Yeah, we'll do half a plot. It's really like, feels like half a season in terms of the plot. But by doing that, we get to focus on character. We get to focus on the day-to-day life. And that I absolutely love. And I think the thing that stops this show from becoming truly and utterly just pretentious in this season, because it is very self-indulgent, it is very artsy-fartsy at times with about 14 montages, some of them taking entire episodes, although I think they're the highlights of the season. I think the thing that stops this from kind of like crawling up its own ass with its own pretension is that despite all of the incredible cinematography and editing and just the way this show feels and its pace and its mood and its style, the thing that makes this show maybe the best show on TV is the characters. The characters in this show, from the writing, from the acting, from just how they feel and live and breathe in this show, they feel real. They feel authentic. They feel raw. They just have a quality to them where I believe they exist outside of the scene that they're in. So many shows have a character, then they'll rock up and there might be a new character or whatever, or they just might be a main character, and you don't really get the sense that they existed outside of the moment they stepped into frame, and then when they leave frame, they don't feel like they exist. They might just exist to kind of push the plot forward, they might exist for this reason or that reason, but they don't really feel like they live and breathe in a universe outside of the frame that we're actually experiencing. And not every show or character needs this, but just, I feel, I'll name 2 characters this season where I just felt like they existed. And we get a bunch of new characters, but mainly, I feel like the one was Frank, Josh Hartnett, just rocks up for like 3.5 minutes. I believe he exists in that house outside of the frame when he walks in. And then Computer just suddenly rocks up, and people are talking about him before he rocks up. And the way they talk about him, it's subtle, it's clever. They're just calling some guy Computer. And someone's like, what computer? What computer? Oh, Computer's a guy? Of course he is. And when he rocks up, and the way that every single different person interacts with him in a different way, but also in a lot of ways the same way, because they view this guy as just some robot computer guy, it feels real. I feel like some of these characters have known him for 35 years. I feel like when this guy leaves this room, he's off to do more computer bullshit with some other person in some other situation. He doesn't feel like he exists to come into the scene. He feels like he just exists and he happened to walk into the scene. And I feel like even the cameos, I mean, Josh Hartnett's a cameo, but we get bloody John Cena. John Cena rocks up like it's an SNL sketch, like it's a Marvel movie where he walks and he's like, it's me, Captain Marvel or whatever. And it's just like, to make that not ridiculous and to make that not feel like a Marvel cameo or an SNL sketch where it's a famous guy and rocking up. I don't even know how they do it. It's unquantifiable how they can make people just fit in when they are larger than life. Like, I don't know what that guy's name is. Well, I do, it's Sammy. But that's John Cena. And I didn't stop seeing John Cena because he is so famous. But I also felt like he totally fitted in with those brothers. And he felt like he did exist in that universe. And the way they're able to do that, and they did that with the Christmas episode last season, where it was like, here's a whole family. Are all of them incredibly famous people? Yes. But now, when I look at Jamie Lee Curtis in another movie, I'm like, it's the mum from The Bear. Like, this is her defining role. So let's talk episode 1. Carmen's culinary journey through a bunch of fancy pants MasterChef restaurants, kind of a journey through his past leading up to the present day. We essentially get a long montage episode. And I am in awe of this episode. It is overwhelming as an episode. Like so many of these episodes, I think particularly for me, this season, episode 1, 2, and 3, they have just this feeling where I'm like, I don't understand how they made this. I don't understand how they were able to conceive from a storyboard perspective and then in the editing room make it actually flow and work the way they do. It's so spectacular. We mostly follow Carmen on his journey through a bunch of different fancy pants restaurants, things we've seen glimpses of, but we really deep dive into the day-to-day, the repetitious nature. We get to really follow Carmen and really see why he is the way he is, and to really focus in on a full episode like this. I loved it because we got to really see why he wants to be and do the things he wants to do with this restaurant, and how hard he worked, how he put his soul, his mind, his blood, sweat, and tears, everything into these fancy pants restaurant. And he really was like just so narrow-minded and focused, and it's such a repetitive day-to-day thing. It really kind of struck me how much of himself he put into it, and then that moment that phone call happens and he has to come home. Well, I suppose he doesn't have to, I suppose he chooses to come home, because of course he does. It really kind of makes you realize like what he's given up and how hard he has worked. And just the way they did this with, I feel like in a lot of ways this feels like the anti like the Bear episode, because the Bear, when I think about it, it's stress inducing, it's anxiety inducing, it's fast cuts, it's quick, it's dialogue heavy, very dialogue heavy, lots of screaming. This episode is so quiet in comparison. There has a song over the whole thing, this haunting melancholy, but also somehow kind of tranquil and beautiful score that just goes over the whole episode. It just has such a beautifully kind of quiet, for the Bear, rhythm to it, and the rhythm and flow of the episode. And it has a lot of that repetitive, fast cut nature that the show has had. It feels like it takes a breath and slows down. And so in that way, somehow it feels like the most The Bear episode ever, and yet somehow the anti-The Bear episode. I don't know how they did it. Just like everything in this show, it's just so well done. I was in awe. And on the stripped back dialogue, what I think really, really works about this, it's not like it's free of all dialogue. There is moments, sentences, one line here or there, and they just feel so powerful. Like when the show holds on a moment for more than 2 seconds, it emphasizes the power and the moment, and it really makes you feel that shot, that facial expression, that whatever they're holding on. Every single line of dialogue in this episode held so much more weight, felt so much more powerful, felt so much more relevant. In a lot of ways, I really felt like this was such a beautiful way to show Carmen's memories of these moments, because when you look back on a thing, you remember the repetitiveness. Oh, I had to do this every single day, doing the beans, doing the this, doing the that. Like, I had to do this thing again and again and again. So we get that repetitiveness, that rhythm, that flow. But then you get those moments of dialogue that just, you know, are staying with him up until this day. And one of them being like Jeff just walking past, just insulting him for no reason. He hasn't done anything. And you just get these moments where all he remembers of Jeff is just insulting him and insulting him. And it cuts in, and like, they're the moments that have stayed with him, that make him who he is now. And then you see the opposite side of that with Olivia Colman. And she's like this beautiful kind of motherly figure. And at times she's brutal and she's harsh. But at a certain point, she kind of realizes the talent in this guy. And you see these little beautiful moments. And it really just feels like how you look at memory, where you don't remember whole conversations. You don't remember whole things. You remember that one time that one guy said that one line to you, and it stayed with you forever. And it seeps into your soul. It's a really good episode. And I also love how in this episode, it's not just Carmen's flashbacks through his journey leading up to this point. It is non-linear in maybe the craziest way I've ever seen. Like, for the first 5 minutes, I was like, wait, hold on. Has Carmen quit since being locked in the freezer? Is he going back to them? Like, it just had so many different things. It was so non-linear. So much was going on. We got about 312 different timelines. It was just so well crafted, though, where when I revisited the episode and I watched it for a second time after I'd finished the season, like really kind of knowing exactly what every moment was and exactly where it was in the timeline, as I'm going to just keep saying again and again and again, I don't understand how they did this. I am in awe. It is such a masterclass of montage. Honestly, I think my only critique of this, and it'll be the same for episode 2 and 3, is I do think the season starts so strong with 3 of the best episodes of the show. And obviously, you know what I've said so far. I love this show. It's the best. it does kind of make me go, oh, this will clearly be the best season. This is going to be so crazy. And then I think from 4 to 10, it's still the best thing on TV, but I don't think it's as good as the first 3, which really, really worked for me in 3 completely unique, separate, different ways. Yeah, so my only critique was like, it started so strong. It just can't live up to that. So, episode 2. Outside of the first 2 scenes with Sid and her dad and a montage through the city of Chicago, where it's like, oh, the city, it'll live and breathe, don't you love Chicago or whatever. This is a bottle episode. This spends the entire time around that one kitchen bench. Carmy stands there alone. He's made a new menu. He's made the non-negotiables. And let's be honest, he's lost his mind. He's insane and crazy. And every single character in the show essentially comes into the room and it's just like a play. It is just a bottle episode, real time, 25-minute, just dialogue scene. And it is, once again, classic The Bear doing what The Bear does. Fully dialogue, mostly screaming, incredible fast cuts, then it suddenly cuts to a character, cuts to a moment, emphasizes a thing for like 2.5 more seconds than usual, and it just has all the weight in the world. This episode does everything I think The Bear has always done, really, really good. I think it's probably the best episode of the season from like a classical The Bear standpoint. We're in a kitchen, people are screaming, everyone's mad, and the editing is perfect. This is so good. Also, rewatch the episode and just look at that clock. I didn't even notice there was a clock in the room until like I rewatched it because my brother was like, look at the clock. Look at the clock. How do they make this scene? And the clock's just perfect the whole time. Imagine filming a moment where Carmen's just like nailing his performance and then suddenly you look up at the clock and it's just like 1 minute wrong. And like you might be thinking, maybe they CGI'd it to be different. You just know they didn't. You just know they didn't. And I just think these 2 episodes together work as such a good kind of double feature, if you will, like a 1-2 punch. First episode, dialogue-less, essentially. And then this episode is all dialogue. And I just think the way they work together, where I get everything I could possibly want from The Bear in 2 episodes, 1 hour. So episode 3, another montage episode. Yes, please. Yes, please. Can I have some more? So this episode is essentially just a montage of the first month or a couple of months of the restaurant, and the restaurant in full flight, in full, just like, this is the restaurant. And like for the first like couple of minutes, I'm like, wow, they are nailing this restaurant. They are so good at restauranting. This is awesome. And then there's just that turning point where suddenly it's just so chaotic. It's so hectic, and they are absolutely not nailing this restaurant thing. I loved it. I loved it so very much. I feel like I've said everything about like the editing and cinematography and the filmmaking side of things. Everything I've said, this episode I think does once again perfectly. It's just so compelling. It's so exciting. On a story point, I really, really like how we're kind of continuing on Richie and Carmen's kind of dynamic of like, they love each other, but they really hate each other in the workplace, and how it's so separated by the back of house and the front of house, and the way that Richie keeps thinking he's getting screwed over. I really enjoy that it doesn't resolve them. Like, this episode doesn't end with them being like at the back of the house having a cigarette being like, well, we weren't friends at the start of this episode, but now we're back to being best buddy cousins. Like, it's just like, no, after 3 months, it was chaotic and everyone's screaming, and it ends and it's chaotic and everybody's screaming. And I kind of like that kind of, not structureless, like the episode has great structure, beginning, middle, end, of how it's like, oh no. It still kind of like works for me. The way that this season not resolving all its plot threads works for me, where it's just a day in the life. And if you're just like, if it feels as raw and authentic as this show does, even though it's so stylized, I just love that it's like, yeah, things just don't get resolved in 25 minutes like a sitcom. Like, things are just left kind of dangling about, and people just keep moving on and keep going day in, day out, day in, day out. And they don't resolve things straight away, especially when they're so focused, like Carmen and Richie are, on making this restaurant work. And my favorite moment of this episode is where Fack takes out the thing and he pours the fancy whatever soup things in front of them, and then just walks back in because Carmen's had poured in front of them, and he's just so mentally checked out because he's just such a hectic work schedule that he just comes back in and he hasn't given them he hasn't given them the meal. He just poured it in front of them, like Carmen said. Yeah, you can tell. I found it very funny. It's probably the funniest moment of the whole show so far. I was in hysterics. It's so funny. And it's such a good little kind of moment to emphasize It's too chaotic. They're not keeping up. They're not dealing with any of this. And so his brain just like went blank. And it's so dumb. And it's just in the background, you see that woman like, wait, what the hell was that? Just, chef's kiss. So I'm not just going to briefly talk about the rest of the episodes. I feel like from the first 3, they feel like they're very specific standalone-ish feeling kind of episodes. And then the rest of the season essentially kind of deals with, even though it doesn't resolve any, 3 main plot points. So I'll briefly talk about them. We've got the review. The review is a weird one because in episode 4 when it ends and they're like, oh my God, they've already been in the restaurant. They've already reviewed us. I was like, oh, this is the plot for the season. This is juicy. It doesn't get brought up essentially again. It essentially isn't a plot one. There's a photo episode, the next one, where it's all focused on getting the photo. But that's what I like. It's like the day in the day life. We're just focusing on these little moments of these characters. But as a structure for a season, it's kind of funny where it's like, oh, okay, so this is what it's going to be about. Not really. And then at the end of the season, Carmen looks at his phone and he screams and swears and he's angry. He's like, oh, dang damn it. He's seen the review. And I like throughout the season when he's thinking about it and all these fast frenetic montage moments, we see like, it's really good. He's the best chef in the world. And sometimes it's like, he's the worst chef you've ever seen or whatever. And I could never really tell, like, are people writing these things? Is he just in his mind imagining what this first review will be? Or are kind of lesser known critics just reviewing it and talking about it? Like some idiot on YouTube giving his opinion, screaming it into the void. But I kind of like that I didn't really know. But it's really more about this one big main critic. Like the Roger Ebert of chefs, I imagine, is going to be like giving them like thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I really enjoy that, like, with it ending on this cliffhanger, Carmen's reaction, like, kind of, I feel like, doesn't reveal it which way or the other. Like, his reaction at, like, on a surface level, it's like, oh, he's angry, so it's a bad review. Maybe, but I also feel like he might react like that if it's a really positive review. Because imagine if this guy's like, this is the best restaurant in the world. It's like, okay, so he needs to get this perfect review to get this star. But what if he gets the perfect review and then gets the star? What, you think he's going to be satisfied? What, you think he's going to be happy and content? Hell no, Carmen's insane. And he's always going to thrive and strive for more. He's always going to need more. He's always going to feel empty and feel like he needs to fill the void with more stars, more recognition, more. Well, at least that's how I read him. That's how I kind of vibe him as a character. And I love that. So him being angry could be like, he's like, oh, God damn it, I made it. Now what's next? And so he could be almost, I don't know, I just feel like you could read it either way, which I find really, really fascinating. So this season for Sid, her plot essentially for the back half at least is that some guy from the Fancy Pants restaurant that's closing is like, I'm starting up my restaurant, you can be the head chef and you get more money. He gives her a contract with actual numbers and all these things, and it's better than the deal she's going to get with the bear. Also, Carmen's insane, and he keeps pushing her away, and he keeps being volatile and insane and just angry all the time. Sid is clearly the less stressed and the least damaged out of anybody in the show. And so it's kind of interesting to kind of see this thing where it's like, if someone's offering her a clearly better deal, but you don't, like, as the audience member, I feel like we don't want her to take it because we're like, no, be part of the bear, the bear. Sure, they're damaged and flawed and potentially an awful, horrible, dysfunctional place to work, but it's the bear, baby. I do feel like her reaction at the end of the episode where they're all having a party and they're all singing and dancing. Also, the finale, that song they're all singing and dancing to, that's like the main song from American Pie Band Camp. Just a weird choice, I feel like. I don't know. Is it weird that I know that as a fact? Is it weird that I remember the movie American Pie Band Camp? Sure. I'm sure that movie is dated, maybe the worst any film has ever dated, but when I was 12, or like 8 or whatever, I was like, this is a movie. It's not. So yeah, they're all singing and dancing to that song from American Pie Band Camp. She kind of has this moment of realization and she goes outside and she starts like having a panic attack and screaming and crying and being like, no, and it's really intense. Of course it is, it's the bear. I feel like that is her definitely confirming to us, the audience, even though it's on a cliffhanger, I feel like she's decided she's leaving the bear. Because otherwise she wouldn't be like sad. Like there'd be a moment of her like looking around the party and remembering all the time she's had with the bear and going, this is my family. This is my found family. Let's go. Whereas I feel like it's her going, oh, I remember all those moments as a family. It's all beautiful and happy. But then she's thinking, well, no, Carmen's really just pushing me out. It's not a partnership. Whereas I can be queen chef at this other place and it won't be it'll be chaotic because of course it's a restaurant. It's not going to be bear chaotic. And so I feel like she's decided she's going to betray them all. And that's what brings on the crying and the panic attack and that feeling. That's how I read it. I also think like that's the most interesting way to kind of move forward on the story. To be like, yeah, season 4, she leaves the bear, and then maybe at the end of season 4, coming back for season 5, she's back with the bear, baby. Or maybe the rest of the show will be this thing where we thought Carmen and Sydney were like building up together to make this thing, and now for the rest of the show, it'll be 2 competing restaurants. I think maybe the most interesting thing will be to make Sydney kind of betray the bear, but do it because like she should. I want her to stay because I like the bear and I like Carmen, despite him being Carmen. If I was her, which I wouldn't be because she's very organized and she likes cooking, 2 things I hate being and I'm not, I feel like I would not want to be there. I don't know. It just like, he doesn't treat her very well, and it's hard to watch, and it hurts at times. Yeah, I don't know. That's the plot I'm kind of the most interested by, I feel like what decision do they make, because I feel like it will have the most ramifications moving forward. And the last plot thread that was essentially a season 2 plot thread at the end of the finale where Carmen breaks up with Claire is essentially not addressed. Like, they bring it up and they talk about it, but he doesn't call her, he doesn't interact with her, he doesn't see her. We see one flashback at the start of episode 4, I think, where they talk, and there's something about breaking bones or something, and I remember watching that being like, that feels like that's a metaphor for how the next conversation will go. But so much happened, I kind of forgot what it is, but let's all pretend I didn't, and I'm like, yep, that thing she said about the bone, metaphors, I think. And so that will obviously tie into their first interaction in season 4. And once again, on first glance, it feels like they just didn't develop this plot and they just left it and they just like forgot about it. But I don't think that at all. I think it really, really works. I really do think it kind of speaks to Carmen's kind of mindset, whereas like, get out of here, you're not good for me because I don't deserve love, but I'm focused on this restaurant or whatever. And he can't focus on this restaurant if he's got a love. He's like a superhero where he's like, I can't have a love, I've got to save the world. But he got to make a good fancy burger or steak or whatever. And he's got to subtract all the delicious ingredients and just give you this horrible little $800 meal. He's a hero for the fancy pants folks that we all hate. And so the fact that the entire season takes place where he doesn't call her, and he thinks about calling her at the end of the season, but he doesn't, I think speaks to how Carmen's mind is so focused on this restaurant, and months take place and he just doesn't call her. He doesn't like fix the situation, and I feel like it makes him feel like a realer character, where he's not like, well, I gotta tie up this loose plot thread because it's the end of the season and this is the show. It felt like he's a real character where he's like, I just can't, I won't. And I just think it works so well, even though at first glance I feel like it's kind of bizarre that it's not addressed, but I think it really, really works. And if you see season 3 is really just a part 1 of a complete full season, I think once season 4 ends, it will work a lot better for people who don't enjoy that didn't come up this season, because then you'll look back on season 3 and 4 and go, oh no, but then we got to spend time with Tina and Sugar and spend an entire flashback montage episode because we didn't have to spend time fixing and figuring out all these plot threads just to make it feel tight as a season. Or maybe that actress was busy and they just couldn't, and that's the reason. Who knows? But it's not that. It feels very purposeful that Carmen just like ignored it for a whole season because he's so focused on the restaurant. But then at the end of the season, when he gets that closure with the dinner party, where he's like, this thing that I thought would be here forever, like how he'd imagine his restaurant once he makes it will be there forever. Suddenly he's talking to Olivia Colman and she's like, I don't know, man. Screw this restaurant business. Screw this thing I've been driven and passionate about my whole life. I just want to like live with my family or whatever. So he's hearing this and going, well, if I get my restaurant and I do make it, in 10 years, what if it goes away and then I don't have Claire? So I think he's going to reflect and realize, no, I need Claire and the restaurant. Like everyone needs, like you need kind of human personal connections because you can't just strive for one kind of thing that in a lot of ways isn't tangible and doesn't really exist and can go away, even though he thinks it wouldn't. And I think that was really interesting that this restaurant, this thing, is kind of a metaphor for how his restaurant might be one day. And so I do think his resolution at that dinner party of realizing this about the restaurant and that conversation with Olivia Colman, but then also facing off against Jeff from Community, and kind of, he's come to kind of some kind of resolution, some kind of, I don't know if he's come to terms with it or come to peace with it, but he has definitely come to some kind of next stage in that emotional journey with dealing with that trauma and that horrible guy and all this stuff. I feel like he's kind of starting to change and adapt and learn and grow, I guess. And I feel like that end point of this season makes it feel like there is an arc to this season. It's just kind of a stepping stone and not a final thing for Carmy, which is what it kind of makes it feel like it's not as much happens. But I think a lot does happen for him in that last episode with that conversation with Olivia Colman and with the conversation with Jeff, and how he's now coming to terms with how he's got to kind of move past these things and kind of open up a bit more. So I think he will kind of resolve things with Claire next season in some way. I think. Probably. Maybe. Who knows? Oh, also, just before we finish, we had that episode with Tina, episode 6. I thought it was pretty good, maybe the weakest of the season, but I was just so involved with like the restaurant stuff. I'm like, more restaurant stuff. But the last scene in that episode that takes place over like half the episode was just her and Mikey. It's great to see have more Mikey, have a full scene and kind of enrich both their characters with this one really powerful emotional scene. Really, really good. Made the whole episode kind of tie together and work for me. And then we get episode 8, which is the pregnancy episode. And Jamie Lee Curtis, once again, is giving the performance of her career. And we get to see her as a mother for like a proper mother for the first time. And as it kind of like, it starts off a bit tumultuous. And then as the episode ends, they finally get this really beautiful moment together. Really good stuff. So overall, The Bear Season 3 is spectacular. Is it the weakest season? Maybe, probably. But who cares? When The Bear is at its worst, it's still the best thing on TV. Good season. Loved it.